When you make a wildlife film, one of the most important things is, of course, to know about your subject. But as I'm not a scientist in the way of having studied in detail animals or their behavior, I have to refer to experts who know. One of the most extraordinary characters I've ever met was Adrien Deschryver. Adrien took us into the forest, confronted us with the gorillas, and we got charged and charged and charged again. And I think, and I'm sure, if I would have even flinched once and would have dropped the camera or would have run or turned around, Adrien would have said, well, this is obviously not the right man to make this film.
The video clip of a conservationist standing his ground against a charging gorilla garnered over 11 million views after being posted on YouTube by the channel Blocked Username on June 10th, 2008, inspiring awe, disbelief, and such hilarious comments as, "The gorilla just wanted a closer look at his balls, but the closer he got, the scarier they became. That gorilla was so brave, he actually confronted this man's giant balls. You should never joke with these animals. They are insanely strong and territorial. The gorilla really risked his life here. When this guy creates an account, the terms and conditions agree with him. This guy dropped his parents at work before going to school. The gorillas weren't charging him at all. They were simply being pulled toward his balls. As they are so large, they each have their own gravitational field. When this guy smokes, the cigarette gets cancer. This guy once went to school late. The teacher punished the other students for coming early. Those gorillas are extremely lucky that his balls didn't charge back at them." Of what little information is written on this man, and his balls that the comment section seems so obsessed with, we know for certain that this footage comes from the 1974 documentary simply titled Gorilla. But the version of the scene that went viral with this specific narration actually came from the 2004 Werner Herzog documentary The White Diamond, which itself takes excerpts from the 1984 documentary A Breed Apart, The Wildlife Cameraman. As fascinating as the footage is, and as hilarious and memorable as the comments are, which add a whole other element to the video, this story actually goes much, much deeper, to the point that some would argue this man and the gorillas he studied had an effect that's still rippling today. In the heart of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the dense rainforests cradle the last remaining strongholds of the eastern lowland gorillas, is the legend of Adrien Deschryver. Born in Belgium, Deschryver became a photographer and conservationist, committing his life to protecting the majestic gorillas. Yet his legacy, punctuated by moments of extraordinary courage, gentleness, and humor, has its share of shadows. Deschryver's encounter with the charging silverback gorilla is undoubtedly an iconic moment in wildlife conservation history. In the footage, Deschryver stands his ground as a massive silverback, whom Deschryver called Casimir, barrels towards him, only to halt in his tracks. The gorilla appears to acknowledge the human as the dominant one in this exchange. When this moment of raw courage went viral, over 3 decades after it was filmed, millions of viewers saw how body language could command respect from even the most powerful of nature's beasts. YouTuber Charisma on Command makes this point in the video, Physical Dominance, How to Use Body Language to Command Respect.
The first person to flinch or look away loses, which is why fighters go to such great lengths to not give an inch of ground. And this isn't just an arbitrary rule that was made up for boxing. Flinching and breaking eye contact are built-in evolutionary tells that communicate fear, which is why they can sometimes matter even more than raw strength when it comes to a confrontation. Because when one animal isn't afraid, that's a good sign that it has an advantage that needs to be respected. Just watch this charging gorilla back off when a puny little human doesn't flinch, even though the gorilla could obviously tear him limb from limb.
However, this exchange was but a fraction of Deschryver's legacy.
Adrien Deschryver, sometime hunter, survivor of a bloody civil war, is best described as a man of peace, even though one violent part of his life made him otherwise. A Belgian with plantations on the slopes of Mount Kahuzi, he survived the terrible Congo fighting of the early 1960s, though he saw his farm and home burnt to the ground. Deschryver is a man of great gentleness and few words. He is also a man of deadly action when necessary. During the fighting, he evacuated his family safely across Lake Kivu by dugout canoe. At one point, he captured 300 raiding Simba rebels single-handed with a jeep and heavy machine gun. But none of this saved his property from destruction. When peace returned to Zaire in 1965, Deschryver had had enough of violence and killing to last several lifetimes.
Born on May 11, 1939, Deschryver found his life's purpose far from his homeland, amidst the forests of Central Africa, placing him alongside other renowned conservationists, like Dian Fossey. In the 1960s, both were pioneers in habituating gorillas for research and tourism purposes, although their methods and relationships with the indigenous people varied significantly. Deschryver's efforts culminated in the establishment of cwschultz National Park, a sanctuary for the critically endangered eastern lowland gorillas, covering both mountainous and lowland terrain, a unique refuge that remains a vital habitat for this species over a half a century later. His deep connection with these animals and the looming threat of their extinction spurred Deschryver to advocate for the creation of a protected reserve in the region. In 1970, his efforts culminated in the establishment of cwschultz, named after two dormant volcanoes within its limits. The park spans over 2,300 square miles and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its unique biodiversity, with 136 species of mammals calling it home. In the early 1970s, Deschryver introduced organized tourism to cwschultz, hoping that international attention and revenue would bolster efforts to protect the gorillas. His approach to conservation was as bold as it was pioneering. His methods were not without risk, however, as evidenced by multiple incidents of silverbacks charging at him. Several of these encounters captured in the aforementioned 1974 documentary. Even still, such close calls were effective in drawing global attention to the plight of the gorillas. His efforts to protect the park's wildlife led to the displacement of the indigenous Batwa people, who had lived in the forests for centuries, some of whom had been accused of poaching the endangered gorillas. Deschryver, with the support of the Congolese government, forcibly removed the Batwa from their ancestral lands to create cwschultz National Park. The sanctuary for the endangered gorillas came at a significant human cost. Deschryver, respected by many as a conservation hero, is remembered by others as playing a pivotal role in displacing fellow humans. This eviction, often violent, set a precedent for the fortress conservation model, which prioritizes wildlife protection over the rights of indigenous people, a model that continues to fuel conflict and resentment to this very day. Some have criticized Deschryver's interaction with the gorillas. Fellow conservationist Dian Fossey argued that his actions made the gorillas defensive and hostile. The film Gorilla shows Deschryver's failed attempt at reintroducing an orphaned baby gorilla named Julie into the wild. Deschryver and his family had been fostering Julie with the intention of releasing her back into her natural habitat when she was older, thinking it was worth the risk over Julie having to spend the rest of her days in a zoo. Deschryver cleaned Julie, his wife fed her, and his children played with her. Julie was a member of the Deschryver family, while Deschryver wanted to wait until Julie was much older before releasing her back into her natural habitat. That time got cut tragically short during one of their visits into the wild when they encountered Casimir and his family.
Adrien Deschryver had this orphaned baby gorilla, and one day he decided to introduce it into the forest to let it know the sights and the sounds. And suddenly we sensed the gorillas were right close. And Adrien stood there with the baby gorilla on his arm.
Now, unexpectedly, Julie started to cry. Even Deschryver began to get alarmed. There was no way he could retreat. The gorillas were all around him.
And suddenly the gorilla called in a way it had never called before. It was a strange feeling. It was all quiet. And suddenly we saw the leaves move, and there was Hannibal first, who looked at us. And I sensed there was something going to happen, which really we shall never forget. Hannibal suddenly called, and Casimir answered from the background, and Adrien was very, very nervous, and we all realized this is a situation which really can end up in something terrible. Casimir came and screamed and just charged Adrien, and Adrien literally had no other chance than to drop the baby gorilla, because if he would have kept it, we're all convinced that Casimir would have killed him, although he knew him very well for many years.
Casimir stopped in the open space where the rest of the family waited to inspect her. Casimir reappeared briefly to assert his dominance over Deschryver, whom he may well regard as a rival. Deschryver admitted afterwards that he only dropped Julie on the ground because he expected to be killed by Casimir. The whole kidnapping happened so quickly that it's only possible to see it when the details are slowed up. Casimir scoops Julie up, carries her away, and then suddenly drops her. Deschryver starts forward as if to try to recover her, but Casimir, who has never once taken his eyes off him, charges once again. This time he successfully picks Julie up out of the undergrowth. It was perhaps a tragedy that Casimir took matters into his own hands and kidnapped Julie.
The incredible thing was that when Casimir snatched the gorilla, that he actually gave it to the females in a gap which he himself had created before he actually charged us.
Alas, unprecedented rain and cold struck the mountains, and she lived for only 10 days. Had there been a nursing female in the group who could have breastfed her, she might very well have survived. But the one thing that has been proved is that wild gorillas will accept orphaned young.
Before we continue with the rest of the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, and share. Thanks, as always, for your support. In recent years, reports of gross human rights abuses against the Batwa people by park rangers and soldiers have emerged, sparking international outrage and investigations. The Batwa, now living on the fringes of the park, have been subjected to murder, rape, and other atrocities, allegedly carried out in the name of conservation.
We left together, mixed with our brothers of the National Army, and the order came from our leader. Our mission was to go and burn these houses, and whoever tries to play around, if you have to kill them, you kill them.
Critics argue that the same policies Deschryver helped implement have paved the way for a neo-colonial approach to conservation, where the preservation of biodiversity is achieved at the expense of human lives. The ongoing violence has raised questions about the ethics of certain conservation practices and whether the preservation of endangered species justifies the suffering of indigenous communities. Adrien Deschryver's death in 1989, under mysterious circumstances no less, has fittingly added to the enigma surrounding his life and posthumous recognition. Some sources say he died of a heart attack, while there's a rumor that he died from poisoning, possibly an act of revenge. Buried at the Shavanga headquarters of cwschultz, Deschryver's memory is largely celebrated, despite his decisions being scrutinized by some. His bravery and dedication to the gorillas are undeniable, but the long-term consequences of his conservation efforts are a reminder that the achievements of human rights activism and environmental activism are mutually exclusive endeavors. In the years following his death, Deschryver's influence has continued to shape the world of conservation. His nephew, John Kahekwa, has followed in his footsteps, dedicating his life to the protection of gorillas and the promotion of community-based conservation efforts. Kahekwa's work with the Pole Pole Foundation, which he founded, aims to address the challenges faced by local communities living in proximity to wildlife, providing economic alternatives to poaching and unsustainable resource exploitation.
All the gorillas I had habituated for the tourism, 5 different gorillas, they were slaughtered. It was so sad. The Pole Pole Foundation was stuck in the mud. No more tourists to bring income. I saw people from the community, they enter the park, cut down the trees because they have cleared the forests because no buffer zone between Cahuzbiega National Park and the communities. Why do you arrest us every day? You know, we are poor, we are jobless. And they said with one slogan, said, empty stomachs have no ears.
For me to stand here today is a dream come true. When I was 10 years old, I watched a film about the gorillas. It was about the co-founder of Kahuzi-Biega National Park. He was my uncle. At that moment, I knew what to do for the rest of my life.
The story of Adrien Deschryver is one of both heroism and controversy. His fearless stance against the charging silverback remains a powerful symbol of human resilience, while the park he helped create stands as both a sanctuary for gorillas and a site of ongoing human suffering. As we reflect on Deschryver's life, we are reminded that the path to conservation is not a simple one. Yes, it's a journey that requires courage, which Deschryver no doubt displayed. But it's also a journey of compassion, humility, and nuance, a destination to an unwavering commitment to justice for both animals we seek to protect and the people who call these lands home. The person behind the refusal to flinch at charging gorillas isn't just a story to be told, but a lesson to be learned.
It's time to live in peace with our neighbors. Which neighbors? Of course, all the people in our country, but we must remember also the gorillas. After many years of fighting, now is the time for all people, gorillas and other wildlife, to take a deep breath and begin to enjoy peace and prosperity for generations to come. Thank you very much.